I just want to underline something you said. We are at a breaking point for emergency response, emergency management. What led to this breaking point? Is it that federal funds have gotten diverted elsewhere, or is that these disasters are getting bigger and just require more money than the government has allocated?
Well, as a nation, and in particularly through Congress, we've really been ignoring this growing problem of the size and the scope of disasters that we have. It's worth noting that, that while climate change is certainly a factor in terms of the number of disasters that we're seeing, we haven't seen a lot of that attention going into increased funding to prevent the impacts of climate change. We've seen some of that in this administration through some of the investments in infrastructure through the bipartisan infrastructure law. We've seen this FEMA administrator try and include more information on climate change and climate mitigation into requirements for hazard mitigation plans. But we still have a very disjointed system. We have as many as 90 different disaster assistance programs spread across 20 different federal agencies. In addition to that, we have a disaster relief fund, but we've become addicted to emergency supplemental funding. So most of the money we're spending on disaster relief for catastrophic disasters of the scale that we'll see with Helene, but for Katrina, Harvey, and Maria, it's coming from emergency spending outside of the normal budget process. We're dealing with this in an ad hoc emergency response sort of way, rather than stepping back and saying, how do we build this better? How do we get ahead of this trend?
You said 90 different relief programs across 20 federal agencies. Has that always been the case? And should that be the case for the future? Is there, given the scale of Milton, a case to be made for something more streamlined?
Yeah, so it's a huge problem. And let's start by imagining you're one of these survivors who is trying to rebuild your home, and you're getting information on assistance programs and potentially loan programs, and then you're also dealing with your insurance. But then on the other hand, there may be an emergency supplemental fund that activates another round of assistance. So these 90 programs, they don't all get activated at the same time. Some of them literally require an act of Congress. They come with that emergency supplemental funding. And so whether you're a state agency trying to coordinate this, a local agency trying to disperse it, or an individual trying to navigate this, it's impossibly complex. Taking assistance from one program could potentially make you ineligible for another. And so it's just a symptom of sort of this, what a colleague of mine calls a Jenga of federal assistance that gets layered on top of every disaster. And so at some point we have to step back and saying we have to quit putting Band-Aids on the patient and actually figure out what is the underlying problem. So a simplification of emergency management, a consolidation, and really a reimagining of this nationally, I think is something that we're on an inevitable course towards once once Congress kind of wakes up and decides to put the time into truly looking at how to better prepare our emergency management agencies for what we're facing.
Is that fractured environment part of why we've heard former President Trump saying that FEMA only gives people $750? Is he referring to one of those many, many programs?
Well, so that is an intentional sort of misdirection in terms of that. So I would hope that a former president has better knowledge of the comprehensiveness of the programs that FEMA offers, especially with multiple declared disasters under his own administration. So $750, there's an immediate assistance package that's offered. And it's, hey, these programs are being activated. Here's some funds to have to buy groceries, buy gas, sort of get you to the point where we can start talking about larger funding and larger programs that are coming after that. So that is one of those programs. But to highlight that, to take that out of context, that's part of the deliberate misinformation that we were talking about.